Testing. Yeah, you can all hear me? Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our side event, which is entitled The Role of Artificial Intelligence in Leveraging Climate Action. So the objective of this event is to raise awareness of AI in the entire spectrum of climate action. My name is Jerry Cunningham, and I'm your moderator this morning. Just a little bit about myself. I am retired from the UN Environment Programme, UNEP, which is headquartered in Nairobi. I still live in Nairobi because I like sunshine. I'm from Ireland, as you probably have detected from my accent. Please don't hold that against me. We have a very nice panel this morning where we have a mixture of the technical with the policy level and also innovation. So I am very grateful that all of you accepted to speak this morning. And also we have academia represented. After retiring, I was involved in establishing a non-governmental organization or non-profit called Eagles 2030. It's very much focused on data and information and networking and capacity building in those areas in the overall context of the Sustainable Development Goals. I also worked in data and information for most of my career. Next slide, please. So I already mentioned that we are registered in Kenya and we are accredited to the UN Environment Assembly, UNEA. And next February, this coming February 2024, we have UNEA 6 taking place in Nairobi. Please put that date in your diary. It's end of February and 1st of March. And UNEA is the only other UN assembly outside of the General Assembly. It was established at the Rio Conference in 2012. EAGLES, in case you're wondering what it stands for, I was already asked this question this morning. Expert Action Group, Leading Environmental Sustainability. Next slide, please. And that's just a mission statement. I won't read it verbatim, but we're working in the area of data information and knowledge, and AI is obviously part of that mix. Next slide. Right, I think we should all see our speakers here. We are starting with Lee Mallon. Then we have a group from Esri. I will leave it to Esri to determine the order because the order is probably different from what I have. So we have Matthew Pinnells, Patricia Cummins, and Sean Breyer from Esri. And we're also pleased to have Valerie Hawley from the Sorbonne, which has a center in Abu Dhabi, the Sorbonne Center for AI. And finally, last but not least, we have Erwin Rose from US State Department. And we're very privileged, Erwin, that you could join us today. So without further ado, can I call upon Lee to show us something innovative? Like myself, Lee has an engineering background. Engineers like to design and build. And this is what we would like to demonstrate in this side event, something practical. So we're going to be going from the practical to the policy level because we need all of these in the mix if we're going to raise the importance of AI in the whole arena of climate action. He just needs to switch switch now. Technology. So we do something. properly. So Lee is the Chief Technology Officer at Humanity, leveraging artificial intelligence to promote climate action and inspire a vision of the future. He also collaborates with the financial regulation team at Abu Dhabi Global Markets, developing AI tools for enhanced supervision of financial firms. Additionally, Lee is the author of DKR, Humanistic AI is Here, and here to stay, I guess.
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, everybody. As Jerry said, my presentation is very much around climate action in the world of AI, but actually particularly around better positive storytelling. So as Jerry mentioned, I've been an engineer for over 20 years with a big focus of artificial intelligence, data, and data-driven storytelling. And in a couple of weeks, my book on this topic will be released. If you want a free copy, grab me at the end. Now, I was going to ask for a volunteer, but because time is of the essence, I've already looped Jerry into this. So before we kind of spoke, I took a photo of Jerry, took a 30-second clip of his voice. He confirmed to me that he was in Nairobi and that his kind of climate ambition is that a prosperous Kenya. And we'll loop back to that at the end of the presentation. So if you look at mainstream media today, particularly around the climate emergency, it is all very much, everything is over. It's all doom and gloom. But if you kind of take fear out of the equation, and if we can kind of inspire a more inspirational future, there's this great kind of excerpt from a human behavior expert in the UK called Lee Groombridge. And basically what it says is that you can't fear people into long-term change. You can fear them into short-term change, but if you want them to change over the long term, it has to be inspirational. And I feel like this is where we're missing on the climate action now, is that we need more positive future thought of how not just this will affect us, but what if we do hit these goals, if we are able to maintain temperature, if we are able to get clean energy, what does the future look like? But luckily, artificial intelligence is just around the corner. The last kind of few years in particular, AI from an algorithmic point of view has made dramatic enhancements on being able to process large amounts of data and provide valuable insight, but also from a creative point of view, we've all seen over the last year the rise of things like ChatGPT and the large language models. This is making climate data a lot more engaging and accessible. Now, we will have all seen reports like this. There's hundreds, if not thousands of them, and publications around climate science, and they contain very valuable information. Lots of data that's backed up by within them. But the problem is if we just take these three reports in particular, which are great, but they're all over 100 pages long. I can imagine no one here has read them cover to cover. Maybe Owen actually with the last one. But they are targeted for us in the room, for people in the industry. They are not for a mainstream audience. And because they're very detailed and very extensive, they are quite hard to translate, especially into the next generation, which are the ones who are going to be both impacted and also are probably our best chance at addressing this future situation. But AI can come in and potentially save the day here. Because these reports, though, are being released as static media, the Gutenberg press kind of model where we just distribute out this information, we can kind of change this for artificial intelligence, and we can use these reports as training data and actually create a neural representation of this knowledge instead of just this static output. And then we can start to do some quite interesting things. So I imagine everyone is familiar of ChatGPT. So what I was able to do, and this took less than a couple of minutes, is upload one of these reports. This is the UNEP report released a couple of weeks ago on called Broken Record, 100-page report, uploaded it to ChatGPT, and now I can interrogate this report using natural language. Your natural language could be English, could be Ukrainian, could be Swahili, it could be anything. So first of all, I asked it to summarize the report. This is pretty kind of obvious low-level stuff. But then I started to ask it questions. I asked it to also tell me what questions I should ask. And actually, if you have ChatGPT Pro, if you scan the QR code, you can also ask questions to this same report and have it accessible. And this kind of changes now the narrative of how do we just absorb and we read this information that is in these documents to how can we start to translate it into the most optimal way for people to absorb it, because we all learn in different ways. Some of us will want to listen to it, some of us will want to watch something, and some will want to read a detailed report. And this is where this concept that I kind of coined called DKR, dynamic knowledge rendering. And what I'm about to show you now, from uploading the document to the end of this bit, took me 4 minutes in total. So from uploading that, I was able to then create a LinkedIn blog post, a LinkedIn post with images and obviously all the emojis. I was able to create an infographic for Instagram highlighting the increased temperature. I was able to ask it to generate a script for net zero, to basically send the net zero messaging. I was able to take that script, synthesize a voice, create an AI avatar, and then deploy this to TikTok.
Hi, I'm here to talk about net zero emissions. It's more than just a pledge. It's our roadmap to a sustainable future. We must act now to reduce our carbon footprint and innovate for a greener tomorrow. Every step counts.
But I can also just create a blog post for my own website. I could create a school quiz for my children. I could also just create some visual artwork that my son could fill in and highlight areas that potentially are warming. I could also just start creating videos for YouTube and adding the data and making it more visual and engaging, or create a spoken word poem for spot of the report. I can then actually synthesize a voice and turn that into a video and upload it as some art. And everything I've shown you so far has obviously been very English driven. The report obviously was English. All the content so far has been English. But what if I now generate this in Arabic? And as I mentioned, all of that, from uploading the document to all of that, it literally took me less than 4 minutes. And to me, that's what this call comes back to. We see a lot. We're basically trying to grab the attention of the youth, of the mass media, against reality TV shows and everything in between. But what if we can actually project positive climate change, an inspirational future, and make it work in the way most people want to absorb that information? Also, translate it into another 10, 20, or 50 different languages. But even this, though it may or may not be impressive to you, it's not quite that Disney moment. It's not the Bambi in the woods that makes us all ephemerally feel the connection to the material. And for me, in particular, I think this is where hyper-personalization is going to come in. Over the next year or two, we're going to see, it, outside of climate, just across the whole board, entertainment is going to get very specific for you. You're going to watch TV programs in the future, and Black Mirror will be a bit more common than we think, where the actual show you're watching will be tailored exactly to your desires. And this is where Jerry comes into this, because I took a photo of Jerry, I synthesized his voice for 30 seconds. He told me he's based in Nairobi and that he is passionate about Kenya as an economy. And taking all that information, I was able to generate a script, AI-based music with a Kenyan kind of tilt to it. I aged Jerry to the age of 70. I hope you are happy about how this is going to look. And also pulled positive climate news from across the internet of Kenyan-based initiatives that are happening around great strides within their stretch toward their goal towards full sustainability. And then also generated the B-roll videos that come with it. Everything you're about to see in this next 2-minute video didn't exist 30 minutes before this presentation, is not stock footage, it is completely generated.
forged for a green hydrogen plant in Mombasa. What started as a modest venture catalyzed Kenya into becoming a leading exporter of green hydrogen. By 2023, Kenya was already harnessing over 70% of its energy from renewables, such as geothermal, hydro, and wind, with solar energy gaining traction. The advent of green hydrogen and other technological leaps enabled us to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030, even as our energy demand skyrocketed by 400%. Remember Amin, a small startup launched in 2023. By 2040, the groundbreaking use of satellite data and artificial intelligence transformed Kenyan agriculture. We emerged as a net exporter of food, a testament to their ingenuity and foresight. Our urban landscapes have been revolutionized, thanks largely to the accessibility of clean and affordable energy. We were at the forefront of innovation, introducing the world's first free-to-use drone public transport system, redefining urban mobility and setting a global precedent. The seeds we sowed in the 2020s have blossomed into a world that thrives sustainably. This era stands as a tribute to your dedication to change, your embrace of innovation, and your commitment to preserving our planet. If only you would see Nairobi now. It has become a symbol of sustainable advancement and progress. Our collective efforts have played a crucial role in this transformation, marking an extraordinary chapter in our journey. Thank you. From 2047.
So as you can see there, thank you. So luckily it worked. You never know with demos. But for me, I think we could just sell much better stories around climate action and actually promote the potential benefit outcome. And again, my view is if we do that, we can actually make a difference. And even sometimes the simpleness of a QR code can actually look a lot prettier than just a black and white image. Thank you very much.
Lee, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that thought-provoking presentation. I certainly need to do something about that receding hairline, but that's not why we're here today. Can I open the floor for maybe a couple of quick questions for Lee? Anybody have a comment to make on what you've just seen? Was it too futuristic? I mean, I like the repackaging of information, and I certainly like the positive news, because one of the things which you often see at a climate change COP is a lot of negative news. We don't have enough money, there hasn't been enough action, everything is being stalled, blah, blah, blah. So I like that focus on positive news, repackaging information in a very simple, simplified format, and multilingual as well. This is all really impressive. So anybody like to make a comment? Valerie and then Patricia. Hold on, Valerie.
Hello, yes, sorry. From the technical perspective, is it an app? Or you've just used the tools that are in open source? Yeah. A mix. Okay.
Yeah, a mix. At the moment, we're actually turning it into more of a physical thing. We can basically put at conferences, so you can go in, like it'll scan you in 360 and then put you into the story arc. So it creates more an engagement piece of content. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for that presentation. My question probably builds on Valerie's there in terms of how do you scale this? How are you plan? What's the uptake on it now, or how do you plan to kind of expose this to get more people using it in the future?
Yes. So today actually was the first showing it. We're a debut, of course. But we're looking actually to demonstrate it in Saudi Arabia in February, and potentially also in Kenya as well. And then there's two versions. You could just run it off a phone and you could take a photo, but if you're able to take kind of images around people and make it a bit more engaging, then you can really put people into it. And actually, the version I showed you today is probably going to be 200% more realistic by the time we properly release it mid next year.
Thank you, Valerie and Pat, for your questions. Any other comment before I move on to the next round of speakers? Lee, thank you very much again for that presentation. That has really opened our eyes. It's extremely visionary, but you have to look long term, obviously, and promoting good news. Now, can I have the next presentation? Our next group of speakers are from Esri. Now, Esri is a company that I have known since at least 1988, because we signed an MOU with Esri and Jack Dangermond, its founder. The company was founded, I think, in 1969, if I remember correctly. Esri is a technology company building the leading mapping and spatial analytics tools. And the session now, which is going to be all Esri speakers, will explore the latest trends in AI and its applications within climate action. So the speakers are going to be in the following order. First, we'll start with Pat Cummins, who is Government Strategy and Policy Solutions Director. And Pat will be followed by Sean Brer, Director of Esri's Living Atlas. And finally, Matthew Pennells, who is Esri's Global Community Engagement Manager. So, Pat, we will start with you. I hope everything is already online there for you. Okay.
All right, as we make the transition here, thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you for a long and fruitful relationship that we've had. I know you've worked with our friend and colleague, Carmel CJ, for decades now. And yeah, that's right. Her name transitions. Yes. We are, if nothing else, we are nimble. So Matthew will jump in the middle here too. But we're really excited to be part of this discussion. I think the whole, just being at COP is exciting, talking about technology and data and how we use that data to really inform decision-making is a wonderful thing to be here to talk about with lots of people from around the world. And the role that AI and the evolving technologies can play in that are certainly a highlight of what we want to talk about here. So we've been in a number of different sessions, and we find, just to kind of set the stage, I think my context setting here before we get into some of the examples that Sean will show you in a live demonstration just helps set the stage. And they're not unlike some of what we just heard from Lee, that we can get wrapped up in kind of the negative, the doom and gloom view. But I think we as a company, and with our leader, the owner of our company, Jack Dangermond, really passionately believe that with data, with creative thinking, with our problem solving and the tools that we have and we can create going forward, we can have a positive impact on defining that outcome, creating the world that we want to see using data, using tools, using visualizations, using things to help communicate what is and what could be and steps we can take along the way. This is just one visualization here when we're thinking about how do we simplify the story. When we're looking at climate change, we've said, can we simplify it? Can we make a map, and challenge Sean and his team with, can we get some people together and make a map of the kind of the red-green map? Where is carbon being sequestered? Where is carbon being emitted? Kind of the sinks and the emissions. And make it simple and compelling and engaging so people really start to take seriously what the situation is now and how we can impact change in the future. So that's kind of our red-green map. And the way we look at this, it's like, okay, everybody's got a role to play. We've got people here at COP talking really focused on climate finance or nature-based solutions or decarbonizing our transportation networks, and everybody's got their view of it. Our role at Esri, the way we look at the world, whether it's climate, whether it's just government operations, whether it's supply chain, we really look at it as like geography is the underpinning to everything. So in this case, sustainability starts with geography. If we can tie everything down to its location, we can start to overlay things and put it in context. So we're not just looking at our stovepipe of data, but we're integrating all that data across the sectors, leveraging the information from the economists, all the demographic data, the financial data, and overlay that with the social data, the demographics. Where are the underserved communities? Where are the opportunities to work with Indigenous people and learn from them? And then, of course, how do we bring in the environmental data with that? So if we look at this from a geographic perspective and that kind of geographic approach, it gives us a common language to start to bring people together to work on solutions, find those patterns, and give us a pathway forward. And when we do this, it gives us that opportunity to apply that geographic thinking, that geographic approach, that geography of our world with the technology that can bring it together in a multidisciplinary, science-based, collaborative, and integrated way. So we really think this is kind of a key for so many people to take advantage of, to carry us forward in that kind of data-driven, science-based way. So that geographic approach and the GIS is what enables that. So it's kind of the concept, the way of thinking about it as with geography as an underpinning, and then using the GIS technology as that platform that brings it together and lets us go through this whole process. Whenever we're embarking on a problem-solving situation where we need to create understanding and explore alternatives, find those solutions, we go through this process. I think of it as kind of the design or problem-solving process. And you may be in a small organization where you're going through every one of those steps. You're collecting the data, you're mapping it and visualizing it, you're analyzing it, you're making those choices. Or you may be in a larger organization where you're just the expert on the data collection from satellite data or in situ data or something else. Or maybe you're the geodesigner, planner, kind of taking all that data and piecing it together. But we go through this cycle and we can go through this cycle using the GIS as our technology technology platform to share, to collaborate, to bring in that economic data, social data, environmental data, and move us forward in making kind of planning, informing decision-making and taking action. And then, of course, we kind of repeat the cycle. It's never ending. So this is not something, as Jerry indicated, Esri's been around a long time, and working on environment issues is not new to us. The company's been around for 50 years. The E in Esri is actually environment. It started out Environmental Systems Research Institute. So it was founded on the concept that can we use data and computer mapping, back then computer mapping was a sexy term, to actually inform better environmental decision-making and planning. So that's kind of the foundation of our company. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Matt Pennells, to talk a little bit more about the technology, some of these tools kind of out of the box, how we're embarking on data science and AI.
Thank you very much, Pat, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, so just to build on what Pat said, then, we've talked about the geographic approach and the principles in why we drive these technologies forward. But ultimately, as a technology company, we are building the tools. And so the main sort of family of tools, the system of tools is called ArcGIS. But really, think about it as a process of bringing that data in wherever that data sits. It could be remaining in large repositories. It could be something you're collecting on your phone, a picture, or something that's out there like a census. Bringing that into a place where you can obviously then analyze it, make sense of it, understand the patterns, undertake some analytics on it, but then share that information back out to someone who might want to make a decision. That could be a minister or a chief executive, or it could be a team leader just working out how to get their team's work done out collecting refuse during a day. So we bring into the context of data and science. Obviously, these topics can be very daunting. Where do I start? What data do I need? So we also curate something called the Living Atlas of the World, which brings together key data sets, the best available data that we've been able to find with global coverage in most cases, that allows you to start bringing context. So you might have a piece of data to say, here's a population of people. Or if you want to start understanding, well, why have they moved? What's the borders around them? What's the water situation around them? You need these other data sets to help inform your analytics. So these data's in the system there can be live feeds of things like weather or predicted data into the future. And these come from multiple sources, Esri, but also third-party providers from around the world, authoritative sources like governments as well. So as we look at, we'll sort of talk a little bit about AI, but just to put it in the context, spatial analysis and data science, we would argue AI is just a new name for stuff that's been going on for a long time, just like smart cities was well, and digital twins. So really to say that, spatial analytics and data science is something we've been doing for a long time, and really there's going to be trends and words that come and go, but the principles remain the same. So whether this be, very different forms of data, vector data and raster data, as point data and stuff that can be learned from gridded information such as imagery, satellite imagery, drone imagery, whether that data has structured or non-structured, and obviously now whether it's a few points or millions of points, again, the size of the data doesn't matter. The tools you may use to integrate to it will change, but ultimately it doesn't matter where it's coming from, what size it is, or how it's organized. The tool's there to help bring these things together. So then when we do talk about AI, we would be silly not to reference the latest terms, and we do what we normally do, and we put geo in front of it. So that makes it relevant to geography, but almost to get people to think a bit like IoTs. If I use IoTs as an example, a great surge in the topic of IoTs, but unless you know where your IoT is, it's relatively useless. So try and get people to think about the underlying geographic framework or referencing system, whether that be a building or a country's national mapping system. They've got to have a location element to it. Same way, if you're talking about AI, we would argue that you've got to at least be thinking around the geographic context of that. And you can see from our perspective, we see the applications of AI. Sean's going to touch on a few. They're not just happening within the map. There's a little bit going on within the tools, a bit like Lee showed earlier as well. So again, with the AI, making sense of large volumes of data, doing things a little bit quicker. There's processes and tools that would have taken a few months that now take a few days. But really, again, it's not a singular thing to us. It's something that will appear throughout technology spaces. So we also feel AI is a big topic. So within our sort of small part of the AI conversation, is trying to make it relatable. So everyone knows AI can help them, but actually, what does that mean? So try and be more scenario based. Can I detect oil spills from satellite imagery? Yes, there's models that can help you do that. All these models, are they perfect? Do they need some sort of referencing or ground truthing? Is always good, but are they going to get you further down a conversation in a faster manner? Nearly 99% yes. So some of these scenarios across the different sectors, we're seeing nearly every sector picking up AI because it's a buzz, but also because they're seeing valuable change. So whether we're looking at coastline change and others things, also a sort of broader list, don't worry about reading it all, but counting cars coming through traffic cameras, working out if a person's moved on a platform, so object detection within full motion video as well as other areas. So that's just a glimpse of the broad areas of AI across Esri. And now I'd like to hand over to Sean to give us a couple of practical examples.
Good morning. I'm Sean Breyer. I'm the director for the Living Atlas of the World. What I thought I would do is just go through a couple demonstrations of the kinds of data sets that people are using within our platform, which is our software environment, to produce products. I'm going to start with a project that we did just about a year ago, which was really focused on with the USDA on looking at crop suitability. Right now, we're looking at a map of crop suitability based on 2020, which is the last, or 2000, which was the last time they did their full census. And this map shows just areas in green. And if we zoom in on it, we can see there's areas of higher and lower. Dark green is where we have the most suitability for growing. In this case, we're looking at corn. And as it gets lighter, those are areas where they're less prone to grow. What we wanted to do with this is take the work that the USDA has done to sort of set their historic record and look at what it would take to move that forward. So we took all this information and put it into a deep learning package. That deep learning package brought together about 35 different layers of information, everything from climate to soils, to growing seasons, growing degree days, and the current crops that grow in those areas to create this model. Once we had done that and trained the model effectively, we could now start thinking about, can we substitute some of those inputs with 2050 information? Say, let's look at RPC 8.5, which is sort of our business as usual plan. What will crop suitability look like by 2050 by running that process? So here I'm switching the map over and you're going to see the 2050. Well, we can see a pretty significant change. The main belt, which we see across most of the Iowa area, was in dark green, and that's sort of shifting up to the north. We can look at that. We can get a good feel, but with the GIS, we can also do a very quick change detection. So we compared those two maps to say where are things significantly being lost, where they're actually going to grow more. So if we look in these northern regions, we can actually see there's opportunity growth up into Canada, but there's a significant loss. But how do we quantify that so we can actually use it as part of the economic models? So to do that, we actually looked at that 2020 information again, and they had summarized the number of bushels per county that have been produced on an annual basis and used that to produce a corn production map by county. Red still means the same thing. These are areas where we expect there to be losses, but now we can actually quantify that. So if I click here on the map, first thing we can do is in Brown County, South Dakota, we can see that by 2050, we can expect a 34.5% reduction in the total corn production for this area. And they're basically losing about 18 billion million, sorry. But we can also see areas where there's lots of opportunity, where things are actually improving. But as we can see, those are smaller in nature. Here we actually see an increase of almost 100% increase. We use these maps with the USDA to help evaluate where crop suitability is, but really putting it in the context of where do people need to focus more? What do we do to make sure that the crops that are being grown inside the United States can continue to be grown? So some of this will be mitigated by hybrid kind of corns, but some of this will have to be improved with things like irrigation, which we haven't done in these areas before. So this is just one example of how we use a analytic process to take information and turn it into this knowledge, which can then be used in reporting. Another topic that's come up quite a bit for us around the last 7 years is around ecosystem management. So believe it or not, there's no ecosystems map of the world. And while you might think there are, they are actually mostly hand-drawn, expert knowledge, but at a very general scale. So about 7 years ago, the USGS went out and worked with a group of international people and the Group on Earth Observations with the goal of creating one consistent ecosystems map that could be used across the world that's consistent. So if you find a place that's somewhere in the world, you can find anywhere that's identical to that across the world, and they would be named in a similar fashion. So that's what this real map is showing here. It's got about 4,000 unique colors, more than anyone can see. But just to get an idea, for the darker green areas, these are areas where they tend to be cooler, wetter, and then have more productivity or soils that will help them grow. If I click, let's just zoom in onto an area of Europe. And if I click on the map right now, we can get a sort of a feel for the way it gets named. So every ecosystem has a unique signature name. This one's a cold, temperate, moist shrublands on plains. So that naming description really breaks down sort of the way that this data set was built, and this ecosystem's name was built. So the first part of that is around landforms. So is it in the flat area? Is it on the hills? Is it in a range? So that's one layer of information that goes into the process. The other is land cover. So we need to know if it's a forest or a grasslands or a barren area or a built area. And then we also have to have climate information. So here we are actually bringing in pieces of that. So we've got the Boreal desert areas. So this is combining both the aridity, the amount of precipitation and humidity in the air, and then the dryness of that and the heat. So when we put all those together, we get this map. And similar to what we saw with crops, we can then rerun that analysis. The trick here is you need to be able to rerun the analysis and replace all these layers. Landforms is pretty easy. Most of our mountains aren't going to move in the next 25 years. So that's pretty straightforward. In the area of land cover, we have two different things going on. Our forests are changing because of global climate change. So we actually have to have both the climate data for projecting it forward and the land cover data match up. So in this case, we had to do a series of simulations to test vegetation change based on the temperature and that precipitation level. By doing that, we could project it 1 year at a time into the future to create a business as usual land cover plan, and then also use each one of the different scenarios for climate change and produce a land cover based on those, including areas where we expect human growth, where we see population growth or population decline. And in doing that, we created the second map. What I'm going to do here, let me see how to get rid of that. There we go. Is right now we're looking at that 2015 map. This was the first map the USGS did. And then we took that methodology and projected it forward. So let's take a look at what RPC 8.5 looks like for 2050 across Europe. It's a pretty significant change here in this business as usual plan. Ireland is interesting because there's actually more than one thing going on here. Let me click on Ireland real quick. And we'll take a look. And here we can see an example. This area is going from a cold, temperate, dry shrublands over on hills to a warm, temperate, moist croplands. So here we've got three different pieces that are changing. Temperature, precipitation, and the land cover are all changing. So this is a definition of how we can see ecosystems of the future. And by doing that, we can start to project and look at, are we really conserving the right places? So we know there's going to be different parameters and we can plug in these different parameters. But when we look at an area like Joshua Tree National Park, where I'm from, we can actually see the extinction of the Joshua trees by 2050. Sure. Hold on, I'm gonna wait for this thing to disappear. There we go. So this is 2015, and then this would be 2050. And what we see is areas up in the higher elevations tend to be changing slower or less affected by 2050, but we've also looked at this in the 2100 projections, and it just continues to climb unless we move into one of the more clear scenarios, a 3.5 or a 2.5 scenario. Then we can actually start to see by 2100 actually the reintroduction of a lot of our ecosystems. Where this is really coming to the storytelling is we can actually start to identify how much of our ecosystems will change. And later next year, there will be a publication that comes out that, depending on the climate resource change that we choose, that different scenario, we can see anywhere from 20 to about 50% of the Earth's ecosystems change by 2050, which is an extremely significant amount. Think about wherever you are at, the opportunity that it will likely change significantly enough to be called a different ecosystem. So this is something that we're really working on. The goal here is to really understand both the precipitation. One more time. Okay. All right, let me pull up the last piece. So the last thing I wanted to just talk about, we saw that ecosystem map, and it really started us thinking about the geospatial side of things, this geo AI that Matt described. And we're prototyping a thing called GeoDescriber AI. Where this is going is it's bringing in, and I've named just a few of the layers here. It's bringing all these layers from our Living Atlas and adding a spatial context to them. And then on the fly, using a model from AI, it's acting and pretending to be an ecosystems manager. How do you describe a place like Yellowstone or a national park? Most people do it point by point. That's how we used to see things on the map. You click on it and you get a response for that spot. What this does is allows you to dynamically grab a boundary, draw your own boundary, and go through this real quick process. The AI takes about a minute to solve the answer. But here's an example of Serengeti National Park being completely described just from the text data and the GIS data, and it also knows where things are. If you look, it's looking at in the northeast part of this park rather than just saying it's in the park. Because we put the geospatial context in, we can describe it even better. And when we share this with our national parks group, they actually wanted to start using this as a way to describe each one of the national parks from a bioclimate and an ecosystem perspective. So this will be something that rolls out later this year, but as a way to start looking at GIS differently and looking at it not just as a map of a place, but a map of an area. And this has made a huge difference in the way things are working with them. So let me hand this back to Matt.
Thank you very much, Sean. So just to close out and summarize, so that's the end of Sean's there. That's coming. So he's given you a hint. And another, as I said, AI for us is not just in the technology, in the sort of data side of things, but how humans can interact with it, a bit like the stuff that Lee showed this morning with the reports as well. But just to conclude and take a step back, we actually believe that this all starts with education. For people to use and take advantage of these emerging technologies, they need to know about it. So we, as a passion, we take a lot of time focused on this. So for ages, ranging from school children to people that think they might be retiring but still want to learn, lots of materials out there to help learn about broader technologies and AI specifically within the climate change topics and many other topics as well. So some of it linked to things like the SDGs, some of it designed for teachers to take forward and use, and some to take on yourself as sort of online-based learning as well. For those that are interested, open science and the interoperability of these things, I think as Lee showed as well, things come from many different sources these days. The topic is still growing, so to continue learning from what we said today, a couple of resources for you there as well. So to wrap up, I think we'll say AI in the climate context is and will continue to help. It's an emerging technology, so we'd be only predicting where things might happen now. I think it will help us understand the huge volumes of data involved. It will then go on to help us communicate that complex data to decision makers in different forms. And as Sean has showed, even help us predict scenarios into the future as well. Some of which are alarming, but at least we're having those alarms 30 years in advance, so we can do something about it. But ultimately, technically and thematic literacy is key to help us all undertake that climate action. Back to you, Jerry. Thank you very much.
Can we have a round of applause for a very well structured and integrated set of presentations from Pat and Sean and Matthew. One thought crossed my mind when I was watching that presentation, and it is how many negotiators here in Dubai for the last 2 weeks have seen what you have just been presented with. Especially, I think the crop one in the USA. And I know you're speaking at 1 o'clock when we have the Ukraine environmental conflict one, because Ukraine is also a major agricultural producer. And I remember a big controversy last year about Ireland running out of grain because Ukraine could not deliver, but that was for different reasons. I think that when you look at what you just presented us with in the future, and it's not in the distant future, it's just around the corner future, it is rather frightening, and it should be of concern to negotiators here in Dubai. And I'm just wondering how we now need to reach these negotiators before the next COP and show them this. Now, I have a few questions here for Esri, which I would like to ask, starting with Pat. And of course, in my own career, I've worked a lot with governments and getting resolutions passed at major summits and conferences. And while I was on holidays in Ireland during July, the Irish government launched for the first time its AI strategy. The UAE, as you know, has a ministry of AI, so they're obviously taking it very seriously. So my question for Pat is, how do you see governments around the world embracing this technology? Now, do you have a mic? There should be a second mic. Yes, you have it in your hand. So Pat, I'm asking you how you are seeing governments around the world embracing this technology.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is a big question. And I think, well, government, I'll start with the United States, and certainly they've got a history of working with this data. I think what they're really embarking on is getting over that hurdle of the silos, of having the scientists have the data and hold the data. And they put out a big report that, as Lee pointed out, few people, we said Erwin probably has, but few people have really read all those reports. So I think they're really focusing on using this technology to make the data more accessible and approachable and understandable. So translating those reports and the impacts of the science in ways like Sean showed us, where make it available for everybody to understand this is what the future might look like. In the United States, the White House and NOAA, a collection of agencies, has put out their the Climate Mapping for Resilience and Adaptation tool. And that was really intended to help state and local governments who don't have climate scientists on staff to translate that information into something they all can use, the authoritative climate projection models, make it local for them to see it and help drive their own decision-making by making that understandable. So I think in general technology, I think a lot of governments are working on democratizing the data and the access to the tools. And then they're also grappling with some of the other policy issues around AI. And I think that's kind of a whole nother territory that we'll be getting into, or governments will be getting into.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pat. Just moving on to Sean, a quick question for Sean. Where do you see AI trends continuing in this topic? You mentioned ecosystems, very important. I must confess, I didn't realize we didn't have a global map of ecosystems. UNEP has a whole division dealing with ecosystems. I shall report that as soon as I get back to Nairobi. I was unaware. I must confess my own ignorance.
It's actually been a long-standing challenge of how to do that and definition of an ecosystem. And that's why the USGS worked with GEO specifically to come up with a harmonized naming convention that they could use. There's also a second convention with IUCN that's been just recently released called the GET, the Global Ecosystem Topology. And that's going to be sort of a definition, but a map needs to be built against that to have a consistent ecosystems map, which makes it unique. As far as the AI goes, we're seeing a lot of information. You know, we think about the big data sets coming in. A lot of these are federal data sets, but we also see a lot more citizen as a science kind of information coming in. If you think about areas, if you've used iNaturalist before, you go out and you take a picture of a plant while you're in the field, it comes back as part of a citizen science project and gets pulled into the entire academic workflow. But most of the work is actually happening at the centralized location. With AI, we can actually start to use phones, not just as a sensor, but actually as a compute power. So when you take a picture of that plant or that animal, that it can actually compute and analyze what it is using AI on the edge, and then just bring the answer to that question to the system. So as the AI moves out, it will be able to be more effective all the way out where data is being collected.
Thank you, Sean. And finally, Matthew is still with us, yeah? So Matthew, you mentioned the importance of skills. And I'd just like to ask you about your thoughts on barriers and or opportunities. Every discussion on AI talks about challenges and opportunities, a lot of ethical issues as well. So let me ask you for your thoughts on barriers or opportunities to these.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. And I think when we talk about the sort of what we call geospatial literacy, I would even broaden it out to data literacy. And obviously data literacy is an underpin to using technologies such as AI. I think it's also making sure both the challenge and opportunity is making sure it's not siloed within education. So we would love to see, you know, if someone comes up through school in agricultural topics or an architectural topics or an economist or a lawyer, they all need to have that base understanding, because whether they end up being a policymaker about it, a user of it, an inventor of it, or someone that doesn't realize they're even benefiting from it, that sort of data literacy needs to be across the board. So as much as we see, you know, geospatial professionals still being a key route, there's more and more sort of users of data influenced things. So having that sort of data literacy, so the next generation of CEOs, prime ministers, managers, decision makers are thinking not just the geographic approach that we promoted, but just data-led decision making is key. So education, picking these activities up across STEM, but also broader than STEM into sort of vocational work as well. So
thank you very much. Our next speaker is ready and waiting, and I just need to introduce her. Let me first of all thank all of Esri staff for another stimulating presentation with a futuristic or future scenario aspect to it. Now, our next speaker is Valerie Hawley. She's currently serving as the Executive Director of the Sorbonne Center for Artificial Intelligence. That's called the SCAI project. So the Sorbonne is not only in Paris, it is right up the road in Abu Dhabi. This is a pivotal entity aimed at enhancing AI capabilities across the Middle East. With an MSc in optical engineering and dual MBAs, including one from HEC Paris, Valerie possesses over 15 years of experience in disruptive innovation. I love that term. All innovation should be disruptive, both as an entrepreneur and a leader in digital innovation at HEC Paris. As a former head of innovation at Daman, Valerie was pivotal in fostering external innovation partnerships and reshaping the company's culture. She also has a significant background in strategic consulting with KPMG. A general partner at True Global Ventures, Valerie specializes in investments in blockchain and AI-centric startups. Her extensive experience in the UAE's innovation and tech sectors, particularly in healthcare and financial services, positions her as a notable figure in these domains. Valerie regularly contributes as a public speaker and mentors young women leaders through the REACH program. And finally, Valerie holds multiple board directorships, notably with the French UAE Chamber of Commerce. And that concludes your profile. So that is very impressive, Valerie. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And I think I will win the prize for the worst accent, Jerry. So I'm sorry for my French accent. I hope you will understand me. Yeah, so I'm going to give you a perspective, an academic perspective on AI and what we do for the climate action. So next slide, please. I will briefly go over what Sky and Sorbonne is, then give you an overview of perhaps the opportunities. We have seen many for AI in climate. I will also highlight some risk, and then perhaps we can discuss about how we can build AI capability across the world in terms of research, but also in terms of education and supporting the innovation and the startups. Next slide, please. So Sky is the Sorbonne Center for Artificial Intelligence. It has been developed alongside the Sorbonne. As you know, Sorbonne is a very old university in France. It's the largest, with 53,000 students that are graduating every year. It's an old university, and it has a specific strengths in applied mathematics and AI. It's very often regularly ranked amongst the top 3 best university in the Shanghai ranking. So we work on many disciplines, on climate, on health, epidemiology, medicine, digital humanity, arts, and so on, where in fact we have about 130 laboratories that are using AI and covering all the field of AI. Next slide. So what is Sky? France, like many countries, as many countries around the world, has set up a specific AI strategy, and is pushing AI in many domains, and is supporting a specific AI center around the countries. So Sky is one of them. It's a translational center. It promotes interdisciplinary and inclusive AI. The idea is to create dynamics in both in research and in teaching, and build strong partnership with industries. As Jerry was saying, we have a center in Paris, and we have a mirror center here in Abu Dhabi. And Sky is to become the flagship of the Sorbonne University expertise in AI. Next slide, please. So we have 2 centers, as you can see, at the heart of Paris and Abu Dhabi. Yes, next slide. I'm not going to. So in terms of fact and figures, we have 10 scientists that are attached to the center, especially in Abu Dhabi. In Paris, we have a network of over 170 researchers, doctoral or postdoctoral researchers. We train about 30 master students that are trained every year. 2 locations. We have 20 industrial partners in France, but also outside France, in Europe or here. 8 academic partners, because we are developing collaboration with other university. Notably, we have an academic partnership with India, with Benin. And we are offering master degrees and lifelong learning program. Next slide. So our strategic focus area are climate action, digital humanities, healthcare, and financial services. And we have, in terms of climate action, we have a partnership with the IPPCs. In terms of, and I think that goes directly into what Esri is also doing. We are in astrophysics. We are building some knowledge and some research project about the exploration of database in open source in terms of satellite data, and we have a strong research program in environmental and sustainability. Next slide. Thank you. So here are some topics and some projects in terms of climate, environment, and universe. As you can see, for example, on the right-hand side, no, left-hand side corner, we are mixing different technology, NLPs, and enriching knowledge base for the biodiversity mapping. So we are using different techniques of NLPs and computer vision to enhance the biodiversity catalogs and build that map that Esri was just talking about. If not, we are looking at different technology to reduce energy consumption of this model, of the climate modeling. We do also sustainable marine management with we have an Institute of the Ocean, which is looking at different data sets that are coming from the ocean in order to protect it and to make sense out of it. So many projects in the space of climate, environment, and universe. They can be a research, they can be teaching chair, or they can be doctoral. That means PhD program. And the idea is that Sky collects that knowledge, and there are some areas where we transfer the learning to other areas. That's the purpose of Sky in terms of being a very transversal and interdisciplinary center. Next slide, please. So we are aiming at training the new generation of researchers. So that's a panel of doctoral projects that we have. As you can see, some are in climate change, but others are in medicine or in or in deep tech and robotic. Next slide, please. Yes, so we also organize events, scientific events, and conferences. Next slide, please. Yeah, and we're also aiming, so on the teaching part, we believe that we want to be think tanks for teaching innovation. So we are, our role is also to educate at different level. We have a partnership with a secondary school to bring in AI capability earlier than university. We have these partnerships with other university where we bring our knowledge, we teach. We also have executive education, I think, and we also work with the regulators to make sense out of the regulatory framework, and we also facilitate debate in terms of ethics, ethical AI, transparent AI, explainable AI. So there are some research projects that are also on this subject. Next slide. That's example of executive education. One is in geointelligence. The second one is certificate in digital humanities. The third one is more on financial services. But just to say that the techniques of AI are touching a broad, wide range of subjects, and we are across all the field of AI. Next slide, please. We also, in our educator role, we have set up different free online education platforms that's to give some basic knowledge to the students that are not teaching, that are not learning AI, that are not in the science department, so that they can understand the key elements and the basic elements. They can learn to code and have already interaction with the technology. Next slide, please. So if we specifically go deeper into AI for climate action, next slide. Just a quick reminder of the AI value chain. So basically, we have data, a large set of data. And as you know, as the storage capacity is always increasing, the computing power is always getting faster. The data is becoming completely ubiquitous. And then these data sets are feeding algorithms. So this algorithm can be in open source, they can be in multi-dimensional space. So there are correlation. What we are trying to find within an algorithm is the correlation of variables. And then the problem of the training and the testing data set that needs to be large, sufficiently large, so that the algorithm works, is accurate, and doesn't have any bias. And the outcome of that, obviously, is knowledge. And mainly AI is, I mean, the use cases of AI are often around efficiency, around prediction, around optimization of process or discovery, for example, drugs or molecule. So the idea is really to get a better understanding of the world around us. So in climate, next slide, please. In climate sciences, the opportunities are huge. I mean, first in data analysis and modeling, I think we've seen that very concretely with S3. And the idea also of that we can model the impact of different climate policies, that's very valuable for the governments and to take action for the climate. In terms of optimization, I mean, we can optimize thanks to AI, the energy usage in homes, in industry, in city. We can reduce waste. I mean, an example of that is Industry 4.0. I mean, the smart city grids, you can balance supply and demand with algorithm. We can make our supply chain less carbon intensive. We can actually increase the efficiency of renewable energy by injecting weather pattern prediction into the solar or the wind farms and making sure that we use them at their most efficient, at their peak capacity, basically. We can also optimize the crop yield. So many use cases in terms of optimization. In terms of monitoring, we can monitor carbon footprint. We can detect deforestation or land use. We can also monitor the compliance with the regulations thanks to AI, and we can monitor biodiversity. That's what we saw just in the presentation before. So the role of AI is very big in terms of predicting. We can actually predict some disasters, and we can predict the resilience to these disasters. We can predict future climate condition. And on the financial side, we can also predict the carbon credit trading price or other sustainable finance instrument. So in terms of innovation and climate research, AI has already proven successful at discovering new materials for carbon capture system, to discover new crops and new molecules that are more climate resistant, and all around the genomics for agriculture and biodiversity is also one of the outcomes of the technology. On a more, and that's what we saw with Lee on a more personal and individual level. AI can also, with hyper personalization, influence the customer behavior. And also what we have seen as well, it's education and awareness. AI powered platform for education are very powerful, and they can personalize learning journeys. So many opportunities. Next slide. But also some risk. And the risk, they lie in 7 different categories. First, the energy consumption. As you know, the models are consuming a huge amount of water, of power. If we ask Google how much they pay every year for their AI algorithm, it's between 4 and 10 million, obviously dollars. They don't want to say the exact number. When we look at ChatGPT, every upgrade multiplied by hundreds the energy bill. So it's a big problem. And there is a lot of research at the moment that is focusing on reducing the complexity of the model without deteriorating the accuracy, so that the energy consumption is obviously reduced. Quantum computing is a very promising solution. So, but a big effort needs to be done for that, because as much as AI can solve climate change, it's also causing a big impact on the planet. The next one is probably what we all know. It's bias and inequality. We have seen how algorithm can be very biased depending on how biased is the data set at the entry point. We all know what has happened with the Microsoft chatbots, that the facial recognition software that can't actually recognize colored woman faces. So we don't want that these bias are actually perpetuated and that some marginalized community are overlooked. So it's very important that climate action benefits all sections of an equitable society. The bubble effect, what we call the bubble effect, is in fact in the personalization aspect, when you because everything is based on what you already like. The idea is that this is completely reinforced and new ideas can't come in. That's also something that we need to be careful of, because otherwise our vision of the world is just very biased, basically. Data privacy and security, you all know about this problem. Data, it's a sovereign asset. Often some data, medical data, financial data, private data are geographically restrained and constrained because country don't want the data to travel. And that's a big thing, because if we want to have diversity in the representation in the data, it's very difficult I mean, we work in healthcare, and that's a major problem. For example, because the data, the medical data, can't be moved from one country to the other, but we do need data set to be completely diversified. So that's a big problem, and technology is now trying to solve that. In terms of regulation, I mean, the regulatory framework needs to foster innovation without not in the detriment of the protection. So it's a fine balance to strike. And I have put next to that the framework of the EU AI Act, which is based on the risk that the use case are presenting. This is an approach that is European. Other countries in the world don't believe that this approach restricts innovation. So there is obviously a question to be solved, collaboration at the global level, so that we have a global framework for regulation. Transparency and accountability. You've all heard about the black box effects. That means we have algorithm, we don't know exactly why they are taking this decision, why is this outcome, and there are a lot of explainable. Explainable AI is a big topic, because we can't leave the decision of an algorithm, the decision that will have impact human to an algorithm without knowing and without understanding the thinking, if I can say that, behind that. So that's a big topic and a big risk as well. The other risks are that we become completely dependent on AI solution. And the last one is displacement of workers, as AI is replacing quite a lot of tasks in our day-to-day jobs. What will happen with our jobs, and what will happen with some of the low position, basically. So there is a big, on that one, I think there is a big need for upskilling and reskilling people. Next slide. So how can actually, pardon, sorry. I'm going to synchronize my presentation. Yes, so how can we catalyze climate action with AI? I mean, at the government policy and planning level, Obviously, we can have a look at the impact of policies. We can optimize the resource allocation with AI. We can also identify vulnerabilities. So that's a very important thing in terms of NGO and advocacy. I mean, this AI can give a lot of information to NGOs. They can monitor the environmental changes and they can have data-driven insight for advocacy, which makes them much stronger, obviously. In terms of scientific research and innovation, I mean, it's all about the climate and ecological system modeling, the development of new materials for carbon capture, and also the discovery of sustainable technology. Business and industry, obviously, they need to be involved. That at their level, what can happen is they can streamline operation and reduce waste. They can improve energy efficiency and develop sustainable supply chain. And in terms of grassroots activism and community project, the empowerment of communities with information thanks to AI and the drive of behavioral changes is very important. So I think I will, next slide. I think on that slide, it's just to say that actually academia has a role to play as an enabler. I think we have a role as an educator in tomorrow's skills at early stage. Maths, especially statistics and probabilities, is probably has to be a core discipline very early on. We need to teach our children critical thinking because they need to be able to deal with these algorithms. They need to be able to monitor them. I think what we also, as we see changes coming along very fast nowadays, I think adaptability and lifelong learning is also are also skills that we need to teach our children. And the last one, very important one, is ethics. Academia is also here to drive ethical and collaborative research. They have to be the guardian of the best practice in terms of algorithm development, in terms of explainability of this algorithm, in terms of transparency, in terms of making sure that there is no bias, and also drive energy consumption reduction with models that are much less energy consuming. They need to facilitate, academia has a role to facilitate the ethical and the regulatory debate with thought leadership, with education as well, with modelization and impact studies and state-of-the-art technology. Academia is also here to bridge the gap between academia and the private and public sectors. So we do that with research share, with industrial partners. We also upskill the workforce, and we believe that it's also very important to support the innovative ecosystem. But what we see is that we need to be inclusive and collaborative. We need to have a global collaboration in terms of technology scan to have a common view on what are the new technology and how they work and also to identify the risk. We need to have a global outreach for skill development and inequality reduction and a global effort for education. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Next slide, but it's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. There is a lot to think about in that presentation. Everybody is thinking about how education and AI are going to coexist. But before you go, Valerie, I want to ask you about how you see building the AI capabilities of tomorrow to actually impact climate action How is it going to work? What needs to happen?
Sorry. Look, I think the education effort is critical. I think we need to educate our children very early on with AI, because it's no point preventing them to use ChatGPT, because the AI tool are going to become ubiquitous. So they need to know how to use them. They need to assess them. They need to be able to see if the outcome that is coming out is valid or not valid. So that's why critical thinking is very, very important. I think we also need to have a global collaboration and making sure that these AI skills are distributed evenly across the globe. And there is no discrepancy, and that we build capabilities everywhere around the globe to make sure that every country has access to this tool, to this understanding. So yeah, I think that's the main thing.
Thank you. Can I invite any questions from the floor? Where is the other mic? Do we still have the other mic? Can you just introduce yourself, please?
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much, everybody, for very interesting presentations. My name is Mariana Yevsukova, and I am co-founder and coordinator of Ukrainian Women's Initiative in the UAE. So I am resident here. And here on Monday, we had a session on gender inclusion into the climate change, into the green recovery of Ukraine. So my question is connected to how much Sorbonne and what programs exist for women's inclusion into the STEM professions, because this is not a secret that women are highly underrepresented in this area, in this field. So there are more men who work in this profession rather than women. But if we see women as part of the solution, obviously they need to have more opportunities and be engaged into the having education and then being a part of the solution. So do you have any kind of specific programs for women? And what are they, and if they're also available in Abu Dhabi?
Look, we don't have specific woman program for women. We believe that we need to involve children very early on with mathematics and science topics. And what we see is that, especially in this country, is that these topics are more attractive to women than actually boys and men. So we have in this country a big prominence of women in our program, many more than men. I think it's not. Then we have lifelong learning programs that are about basic skill in AI, in machine learning, in deep learning, that are open to everybody. I do agree that women are underrepresented, but I think when they have access to education, they tend to be interested in these topics, especially when it's then related to climate action and to subjects that are, how can I say, perhaps more motherly in terms of protection and all that.
Thank you.
I might just add a quick comment myself. Last night, I saw our former president, Mary Robinson, and she's also the former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Mary has a mantra. It is very simple. Women are the most impacted by climate change, and they have the least recourse to justice. And she is very much pushing an agenda which is called climate justice. So I think there is certainly an opportunity here from the gender perspective of climate change. And I'm hoping some of our technical people might give that some consideration. Now, I saw another hand up. Was it Pat? It wasn't. There was another question from somebody? Oh, Lee, sorry, Lee. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't actually have a question. It was more of a follow-up to that, which is I did a lot of work in the UK with girls at age 13, 14, and that is when the drop-off happens, because the stuff that is demonstrated in the examples they're given are typically more male-orientated. And actually, if you demonstrate artificial intelligence through things that are more appealing to females, like when we would do demos, and it sounds so simple, around makeup and hair, but actually that's the stuff that massively engaged that community, and we managed to make an uptick of over 50% of girls then to follow up and do study computing for GCSE, and then hopefully follows through the course later.
Yeah, and I think AI is different than engineering. I mean, AI requires maths and statistics and probabilities, and I think it's different than engineering. And if women can project themselves into the use cases of AI, then I think the balance is going to happen.
And I'll just jump in and add that I think I agree on that there are many entry points. And the younger we engage children in technology and these problem solving tools, we do a lot with K-12 education. We donate our software actually it's available to every school in the world. And we can use that as a starting point. As Matt was saying, you might not major in GIS, but maybe you learn GIS and it takes you down a pathway to do some kind of climate impact career. So I think it's just many different pathways to engage more youth, women, children, girls in particular, to start to get comfortable with technology and thinking they can do anything.
Yeah,
and start in a fun way.
I think also that women have now understood. I mean, it was understood for a long time, but perhaps they have more access. As long as they have access to education, I think then the pathway to more tech and STEM is there.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Can just have a round of applause, show our appreciation. Always nice to have the education academic perspective in this. Now, our last speaker has been waiting very patiently, and it is my pleasure to introduce Erwin Rose. He's the new chair of the advisory board of the Climate Technology Center and Network, which is known by the acronym CTCN. With his extensive background in sustainable development and climate change, and having served as vice chair of the CTCN advisory board, Erwin has been working at the front line of climate action as the leading US negotiator on climate technology development and transfer. At the US State Department, Erwin is the lead on AI for the State Department Climate Office, which is the Office of Global Change. As that, he's the chair of the UN CTCN, the center, the advisory board, and a member of the UN FCCC Technology Executive Committee, known as TEC. Erwin, it is my pleasure to introduce you, and we will hear a lot from the policy angle. And Erwin might also update us on what has been happening here at COP28 in the area of AI, because I know he has something important on that. Erwin.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me say it's an honor to be here at the Ukraine Pavilion, as well as to be with all of you and participate in this discussion organized by Eagles 2030 International. So following Sean's advice, I'm going to tell a story with hope and optimism about how the parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement formally addressed the relationship between AI and climate change for the first time here at COP28. I think this is a story that should give us all hope that we can accelerate progress on climate by raising awareness about artificial intelligence and climate, both in terms of the risks, as were so eloquently described by the previous speaker, as well as by harnessing the benefits, as have also been described very eloquently by previous speakers, through international cooperation and through the framework for cooperation that the Convention and Paris Agreement provide. So the backdrop to the story is the structures that have been in place since 2010 for cooperation on technology development and transfer through the convention, and then also applied to the Paris Agreement since its adoption. And that's referred to as the technology mechanism of the convention, which again, after the Paris Agreement was adopted, it was decided these bodies would also serve the parties to the Paris Agreement. And the technology mechanism is composed of two bodies. One is the Technology Executive Committee. The other is the Climate Technology Center and Network. The Technology Executive Committee, referred to as the TEC, is the policy body. Members are appointed as independent experts by the parties through the COP, and they develop their own agenda and produce papers, hold webinars, and ultimately produce recommendations to the parties on technology development, transfer, and climate change. And then the sister body, the CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network, is called the implementing arm of the mechanism. It also has an advisory board where members are directly representing governments appointed through the COP, but it also includes representatives of 6 of the 9 constituency groups as members of the advisory board. And it conducts technical assistance with national technology focal points from developing countries. It also provides capacity building, and it also has a knowledge sharing, knowledge management program. And that is all directed to supporting tech development and transfer with developing countries. So the negotiations on technology basically respond to the work of those two bodies. So they're sort of, the tech is the source of policy guidance, but then the parties respond to that guidance in the decisions. And then the CTCN is really a small program in the scheme of international assistance. It's been funded at about $10 million a year. Its average technical assistance project is only about $150,000 to $250,000, but it's sort of the laboratory for technology development and transfer in terms of the extensive focus that its work gets in order to provide models, to test out pilot projects, demonstration projects, and help the parties consider what type of technical assistance is most impactful in supporting technology for both mitigation and adaptation. So it's sort of small projects that have an outsized influence because of the status of the CTCN, because of the visibility of its work, and because they're working directly with requests coming from governments in terms of what their priorities are, in tech development and transfer. In 2022, the two bodies approved a new 5-year work program. And for the first time, it was a joint work program, really coordinating the two bodies so that the policy guidance coming out of the tech would not only inform the parties directly, but would also be designed to inform the work of the CTCN. And then the CTCN would become more impactful by following guidance coming out of the tech. And there'd also be a circular, feedback loop where the lessons learned from the CTCN projects would also inform the tech's consideration of policy. And this also work program, not only did it bring the two bodies closer together, but it had more of a kind of proactive strategic focus than in the past. There's been a tension between how demand driven should the CTCN be in terms of, responding to any requests that each individual country proposes in terms of what its priorities are, versus the benefits of any program having some focus, right? Having some model projects, developing some expertise, having some, economy of scale in how it uses its resources, and being able to demonstrate sort of cumulative impacts rather than having the project so fragmented that it's hard to really talk about the cumulative impacts of the CTCN. And that's an underlying tension in these negotiations. In general, I don't like to generalize about so-called developing versus of these national focal points, and that this body should really not tell them what to focus on. It should, take on any request that comes in, whereas the developing countries, many of whom are donors and really trying to think about the program as a whole, what's most impactful, how can we generate more confidence and investment in the CTCN? We've always talked about the need to have more cumulative results, therefore more of a programmatic focus. And so compromise was reached through this last work program, where we did identify 2 enablers in for the CTCN's work, where we're strongly encouraging parties to consider national systems of innovation, a sort of strategic functional approach to promoting innovation domestically, but also digitalization. And the CTCN had already been working on digitalization for the past several years in response to requests that were coming in. Not all the requests were on digitalization, but a substantial number were. They tended not to talk about AI explicitly, but they were all projects that really either already include some aspects of AI within the program or would benefit by thinking strategically about how to maximize the impact by incorporating AI. So that work plan was approved by the 2 bodies in September 2022. It received a strong endorsement from the parties at COP27, including both in the technology decision and then in the sort of higher level cover decision called the Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan. So there was strong support coming from the parties for this approach, but again, not focusing on AI yet, but talking about digitalization and the transformative impact, the focusing on digitalization for mitigation and adaptation. Then as we continued our work thinking about how to implement the work program, some of us started talking about the significance of artificial intelligence and started encouraging the other members to really think about focusing on artificial intelligence. And many of the parties were not really thinking about artificial intelligence in this context, including the developing countries. We're not really looking for the CTCN to focus on artificial intelligence. They have other priorities, understandably. But after a series of discussions within the CTCN Advisory Board and the TEC, in June, we did launch really the first initiative, first sort of strategic initiative these bodies have ever launched, and it was on artificial intelligence. So we agreed to launch the Artificial Intelligence for Climate Action Initiative, or AI for Climate Action Initiative, under the auspices of the UNFCCC. Technically, it's still being referred to as a Technology Mechanism Initiative. And at the same time, there was some work sort of in parallel that the TEC engaged in with GEO, with a Group on Earth Observations, where the UNFCCC became a partner to the Secretary General's Early Warnings for All initiative, and the TEC is working directly with GEO on one work stream under that program. Again, not defined exactly as an AI initiative, but it includes consideration of AI for early warning systems. So then in September, sorry, I don't know if I mentioned, in June 2023, we launched the AI initiative, not very well defined, but we sort of started saying we need to focus on AI, both looking at the positive uses and also addressing the risks and challenges. So we just started framing the issue in that respect and sort of started the dialogue. It was not addressed explicitly in any texts of the subsidiary body meetings in June. Then in September 2023, the 2 bodies approved a somewhat detailed concept note, starting to flesh out how we're going to address artificial intelligence between the 2 bodies, but still pretty broad, still a lot of process about sort of how are we going to develop this work plan, entering into pretty cautiously. And then also in the spring, in the lead up to this COP, we held the first 2 activities under this initiative, and it was really just to start the dialogue. So in Africa Climate Week, we held an event on AI and climate and convening representatives of parties, these national focal points called national designated entities, and other stakeholders to have a first dialogue on AI and climate, really sponsored by the UNFCCC. And then we had another event, same idea, at Asia Pacific Climate Week. Then we came into COP28, negotiating on technology development and transfer. And the one agenda item to negotiate is the joint annual report of the TEC and CTCN. Out of the 26 pages summarizing the activities of these 2 bodies during the past year, I just want to make sure I'm not hitting my time limit. Out of the 26 pages in the joint annual report, there are 3 lines on artificial intelligence. And you could say this was the beginning of putting AI, on the agenda. And it literally simply said, launched in a summary of activities undertaken by the 2 bodies in the past year. It literally says, launched the Technology Mechanism Initiative on AI for Climate Action and agreed to hold a high-level event at COP28 and jointly develop a work plan and terms of reference for an advisory group for the initiative. then the negotiations were, how are the parties responding to the entire joint annual report? And some of us, including the United States, said really that initiative was the most significant thing that these two bodies have done in the last year. And we think it holds enormous potential. And we really want to highlight the significance of this initiative in the decision. And it was not without controversy, because both bodies undertake a lot of activities, and it's still a new idea to have this much focus on this particular technology, a lot of other priorities, a lot of other activities underway by the two bodies. So it was a real negotiation to decide how are the parties going to respond to this initiative in the decision text. So now I will read you the actual decision text that we have agreed at. And the status of this really is came out of the subsidiary bodies, right? So in the conclusions of the subsidiary bodies, which have finished their plenary, this text is recommended to the COP and the CMA, the Conference of the Parties to the Paris Agreement, as a decision text. So it hasn't been adopted yet by the COP or CMA, but it's, I would say it's unlikely it will be reopened. So we do expect this text to be adopted at the plenaries of the COP and the CMA. And I will read it to you, it's not that long. And I appreciate that some of you have been interested in seeing AI addressed formally through this process. And so this is it, this is the beginning. So there's 3 paragraphs. Notes the technology, and you can tell it's negotiated text. It's not exactly what I had drafted, but it captures a lot of the topics that have been addressed here. And actually, it was one of the best discussions. The negotiation was one of the most substantive discussions on technology policy that I've experienced in these negotiations. So really, to me, the initiative has already started to have its effect. So here's the text. Notes the Technology Mechanism Initiative on Artificial Intelligence for Climate Action, the aim of which is to explore the role of artificial intelligence as a technological tool for advancing and scaling up transformative climate solutions for mitigation and adaptation action in developing countries, with a focus on the least developed countries and small island developing states, while also addressing the challenges and risks posed by artificial intelligence, such as energy consumption, data security, and the digital divide. Requests the Technology Executive Committee and the Climate Technology Center and Network to implement the initiative referred to in paragraph 6 above in a manner that gives special attention to the capacity needs for its use, and consider how it can support the implementation of technology needs assessment outcomes and the joint work program of the technology mechanism for 2023 to 2027. Also request the Technology Executive Committee and the Climate Technology Center and Network to enhance awareness of artificial intelligence and its potential role in, as well as its impacts on, the implementation of the outcomes of technology needs assessments and the joint work program of the technology mechanism for 2023 to 2027. So you can see there's a little bit of sort of insider baseball process in terms of the relationship to the work program and the importance that many parties place on technology needs assessments. But I think it's still sort of, artificial intelligence is now a topic. It's sort of enshrined in this decision. There's a mandate to the tech and CTCN to continue that work following this guidance. And I think it may be quite significant in terms of how the global policy community is starting to frame artificial intelligence. And there's a tricky balance between encouraging its positive uses as well as managing the risks. And so we now have this agreed multilateral framing for the first time under this process. So just very quickly, I'll wrap up. We had a high-level event on December 9th. It was organized by the UNFCCC. There was a press release put out with quotes from the UNFCCC Executive Secretary Simon Steele. There were senior officials, some of the ministers ended up, sort of not making it at the last minute, but there's a quote in the press release. But we had 3 or 4 ministers speak, or minister-level speakers from the United Arab Emirates, who of course have the world's only minister of artificial intelligence, as far as I know, and he spoke at this event, and they've been very supportive of this initiative from the beginning. We also had a minister from Barbados, a state secretary from Senegal, and the White House National Climate Advisor, who is basically Secretary Kerry's counterpart as the domestic lead on climate policy for the United States government in the White House. We also had senior officials from GIZ, IRENA, Group on Earth Observations, Microsoft, the Kenyan company that was mentioned earlier today, Amini. We had the representative of the TEC. I spoke on behalf of the CTCN, and we concluded with a grand challenge launched by a AI research community of individual experts from many leading corporations, basically doing a challenge to encourage proposals for transformative AI proposals on climate change, and they will support that with significant in-kind technical support as well as software support. And so now we're moving forward. We're seeking potential partnerships from organizations that would like to work as part of this initiative. We plan to establish the advisory group that's mentioned in the decision. And in April, when these two bodies next meet, the goal is to approve a 4-year work plan for this initiative. So just finally, I would say that I think the Paris process is a powerful framework for global dialogue and cooperation. And by convening parties and stakeholders to address the relationship between artificial intelligence and climate change, we can have a powerful process and mechanism to make sure that we manage the risks posed by artificial intelligence for climate, as well as that we harness the benefits. So thank you for your attention. I welcome any comments or questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Erwin, and thank you for showing your appreciation. I have deliberately kept Erwin's presentation to the end because I think it was very important for us to hear the announcement of the resolution, which in all probability and likelihood, I think will be adopted tomorrow, I guess, or whenever the plenary meets, yeah? I have one quick question. We have seen some practical demonstrations from our Esri colleagues and from Lee as well. And I guess if we had more technical people here, we could have dozens upon dozens and hundreds maybe of practical demonstrations of AI. And I like to see that because it shows what can be done. My question, Erwin, for you is, how can we somehow integrate these good ideas into this rolling work program that you mentioned? Just advise us how we...
Yeah, well, I mean, practically speaking, it's going to be tricky because there is an infinite range of applications, an infinite range of possibilities. And so, you know, we're not going to be the only mechanism encouraging work in this area or cooperation. You know, we're going to be one process. And just as not all tech development and transfer happens through the CTCN, you know, this will be an important space, you know, where it's getting, you know, direct engagement in and attention by the parties, but it's not the only space. And, you know, the reality is it's the UN, it's a UN process. So the work plan will be negotiated. You know, there are some resources behind these two bodies, but they're actually modest in some ways. The CTCN already has a lot of work going on. So one important thing will be, can we, and this came up in the negotiations, can we integrate this explosion of interest in AI? And we're seeing it at this COP throughout, right? There have been many side events on AI at this climate. I think there were very few last year. So we've seen really an explosion of interest, not all because of our initiative, just in parallel because of the wave of interest in AI. So we're not going to be able to channel all the activity through this partnership, through this initiative, but just practically speaking, you know, find a nimble way of showcasing other efforts. Is that working? Wasn't working? I'm not going to repeat everything I said, but you know, there are some initiatives here that do a good job of showcasing what various players are doing without sort of having to have each group negotiate a partnership agreement and an MOU or get into the funding. So I'm hoping that we can both find partners who might actually want to work directly in support of some of these CTCN technical assistance projects or hold concrete capacity building activities with the tech and CTCN, right? And that will just take specific proposals, again, just working out the mechanics of how do you really cooperate with these two bodies. But hopefully we can be nimble enough to also sort of be expansive and provide a platform to showcase ongoing activities without getting too bureaucratic about it. It remains to be seen, and that, that work will be carried out over the next 6 months to really hammer out what kind of work plan can we really agree upon and what kind of partners come forward really wanting to work through this initiative.
Thank you, Erwin. Obviously, in putting together this side event, it was not our intention. When I say our intention, I'm speaking of Eagles 2030, the NGO that I represent here. It was not our intention just to have a side event and everything was nice and, we all go home and forget to communicate thereafter. We really would like to keep this collaboration going. We have a very small group of speakers here, but nevertheless, they're all important institutions. And we do need to stay in contact and collaborate in a very positive way and contribute to this work program and support the resolution when it's adopted. Let me just ask for some more questions. Pat, sorry, you had your hand up. This is Margot from Kiev.
Yeah, so I'm from Kyiv and I work for United Nations Global Compact, but also I'm a student. So I have one small question to Valerie, since you're an academia representative. You mentioned training in statistics, and I definitely agree that for students of different areas, not only STEM, it's absolutely crucial to have the basics. But I feel like a big problem of the education system in Eastern European countries is that we don't really get enough practice. So I wanted to ask you how, from your perspective, we could change the situation. And maybe you have some tools or maybe some ideas. So how, for example, me personally, as a student, could get some more practical training in statistics and in the skills that you mentioned.
Look, I think you perhaps I think we need to multiply the exchange programs, the internship, mixing students. Now the data is commonly available, so you could, for example, work with us on some internship, on some project linked to a data set that is coming from industry partner, from open source, from wherever. So I think we need to multiply these kind of opportunities for internship and yeah, that's how I say it. I think it will be an overall of how we are going to teach in the future. This conversation has started but we need to see a bit what ChatGPT was the big thing. It's now integrated in the teaching for some school. Some others are not using it and preventing the student to use it. When AI is all the AI use cases or the AI technology is percolating into many different areas, I think it will be a big rethink of what are the skills of tomorrow and what do we need to teach our students. I was last week with the Louvre, the museum, and there are many applications of AI for preventive conservation, to reconstruct some parts of the art. It's amazing in so many fields where AI can be applied. So really, I think that's and it's going to be also a global conversation of what are the new skills of tomorrow.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Now it is 1 minute to 12, and I have a meeting at 12:15. And before I go, I have important duties still remaining here. Number one is to thank all of you sincerely for supporting this event and for speaking so eloquently on the subject matter, AI catalyzing climate action. So I'm indebted to each and every one of you, and from Eagles 2030, a sincere thank you. And my second thank you is to the government of Ukraine, who have sponsored this pavilion and given us a platform for our event, and another one at 1 o'clock, which will be focused on the environmental situation in Ukraine. So some of you speakers will be back at 1 o'clock, I know. And also I'd like to thank our partner in ECU, the National Ecological Center of Ukraine, who got you all registered. Well, not Erwin, he was already registered. Got you all registered, myself included, for the Blue Zone, because Eagles, we were not accredited to UNFCCC, although we are accredited to UNEA, but we're fixing that issue. So NECU stepped in and facilitated us having this event. So a big thank you to NECU as well. With that, I have to wrap it up. One last thing, we do need a family photo of all the speakers. And could I ask Margot to take it? And could we need to kill, I think we need to kill the hold on, let me just, Sasha, can you just dim, we just need a photograph, but we, yeah, right now, but I don't want the screen on. Can you just, oh, now it's even worse. It's all. Let's make it black. Okay, that's good. Okay, that's good. Lee will enjoy the publicity, I think. Yeah. Okay, thank you all very much. Somebody wants to see it. Yes. So I need to look myself.